I'd like to share something quite deep that I was learning in my regular studies that I think really needs to be shared and understood. That is the concept of happiness. Everybody wants to be happy, right? This is their main goal in life. You ask anybody, what do you want to do in your life? You keep asking, keep probing, why? Eventually they're going to say, to be happy. I want to be happy. So there's a Gemara that really needs to be analyzed properly, but it can tell us a lot about that topic. Gemara's Masechet Sukkah Mem Chet Amud Bet. The Gemara here talks about a procedure that was done in the Beit HaMikdash called the wine and water libations, Nisuch HaMayim, Nisuch HaYayin. It was a special service that the Kohanim had to spill wine and the special water that came from a spring on the altar, the Mizbeach. And there was two different holes, one for the wine, one for the water. They were like pipes that would spill out and go into this pit next to the altar. And it was a very joyous, happy occasion. The wine libations happened every day, but the water libations happened specifically on the holiday of Sukkot, the 8 days of Sukkot. Some say 8, some say 7. There's machloket here, 7 or 8. But in that time of the Torah, of the holiday of Sukkot, is called Chag, right? Nowadays the word Chag in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, just means holiday. But the Torah, in the scriptures, only use the term Chag, specifically referring to the time of Sukkot. That's called Chag, right? Which means that's the ultimate time of celebration throughout the entire year. That's the ultimate time of what people will try to experience as happiness at that time of year. The Gemara says over here, very interestingly, the following. So first it goes to the whole Mishnah explaining the process of the water libations that happened. And one of the details that it says is that they would blow trumpets and they would blow the shofar, specifically once they bring the water in a special golden flask and they bring it through a certain gate in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, on the way to being libated, to being spilled as part of this ritual over the altar. And when they did that, trumpets, shofarot, needed to be blown as a sign of celebration. So the Gemara says, from where are these words? How do we know that trumpets need to be blown? Amar Rav Ena answers the question. We have a verse in the Tanakh, specifically in the book of Isaiah, that says, Ush'avtem mayim besason, and you shall draw water in sason. What does sason mean? Sason is perhaps a synonym, another word for happiness. And to indicate the happiness, you have to blow the shofar when you're doing it. The Gemara says further, Hanhu trem mine, there were two minim. A min is a heretic. A min is somebody who doesn't believe in the basic principles of Orthodox Torah Judaism, right? Someone, he could be Jewish, he could be knowledgeable in Torah and things like that, but he doesn't believe in basic principles, such as he doesn't believe in the oral Torah, doesn't believe in the Masorah, the tradition passed down from the Moshe Rabbeinu through all the Chachamim till today, right? You have plenty of these sects in Judaism that sort of create their own convenient rules for themselves. And that was a very early thing that happened, it started many years ago, it continues to this day. But those original groups were called the Tzedukim and the Baitosim. The Sadducees in English, those were the corrupt, misinterpreters of Torah that believed in the written Torah, but they did not believe the oral tradition, the oral Torah, and all the laws that follow with that. So the Gemara says there was two of them. In the times of the Gemara, there was two of these heretics. Chad Shemeh Sason v'Chad Shemeh Simcha. One of their names was Sason. The other one's name was Simcha. Now these two names are very common names, right? You probably know plenty of people who are called Sason or are called Simcha. But what do those two words mean in Hebrew? Both of them have a certain connotation of happiness. Simcha, everyone knows, means happy. Sason also means a type of happiness. Now the question that we have to ask is that we know in Torah there's no such thing as synonyms. Torah is a holy language, a language that God founded and used to create the world with. There's no such thing as what we might call in other languages a synonym, where two words mean the exact same thing. They just have different, etymologies and different histories, so they're both used, but they mean the exact same thing. That doesn't exist in Torah. Every word, even though it could have a similar meaning to another word, it definitely and surely has at least a slight, subtle difference for each individual word. So we have to ask the question, what's the difference between simcha and sason, these two types of happiness? Let's see what the conversation was between these two minim, these two heretics. Amale sason le simcha. Sason the heretic said to Simcha the heretic, Ana adifna minach, I'm better than you. Why? Dichtiv. He brings them a proof from the scriptures, from Tanakh. See, they knew Tanakh. They believed in the oral Torah. The only problem is, as we'll see, they misinterpreted it for their own misconstrued, benefits, and they interpreted the words of the verses that completely wrongly, not according to what it should be interpreted as. So Sason says to Simcha, I'm better than you. Why? Because there's a verse in the Torah that says, Sason ve'simcha yasigu. They shall achieve Sason and Simcha. There's also a verse in Isaiah. The point is, what he's trying to say is, since in the verse, my name, Sason, comes first, and your name, Simcha, comes second, that means I'm better than you. This is laughable, but this is what they did. Amar le Simcha le Sason, and Simcha turns around to Sason now, and he says to him, Ana adifna minach. Oh yeah, I'm actually better than you. Dichtiv, because he brings him another verse that says, Simcha ve'Sason li'Yehudim. This is a verse in the Megillat Esther that we'll read soon on the holiday of Purim. In that verse it says that there was Simcha and Sason for the Jews, right? Towards the end of the story there, when the Jews were saved. Simcha and Sason. So in this verse, the word Simcha comes first. So Simcha says, oh, guess what? I'm better than you now, Sason. Amale Sason and Simcha. Then Sason turns around back to Simcha and he says, Chad Yoma, one day, you know what they're going to do to you? Shavkuch v'shavyuch paravanka. They're going to dismiss you from your high position, and they're going to make you instead a scout, a messenger, like a lowly pawn kind of position. Dichtiv, because it says also in a verse, brings him another verse. It says, Ki besimcha tetzeu, because they will go out with simcha, which means simcha will be the one that goes out and scouts, which is like a lowly position that nobody wants. Amali simcha le Sason, Simcha sends back to Sason, Had Yoma, one day, Shavkuch, they are going to do something to you. You know what they're going to do to you? They're going to release you, dismiss you from your position as well. Malubach maya, and they're going to fill up water with you. Dichtiv, as it says in the same verse that the Gemara started off talking about regarding the water libations. Ush'avte mayim besason, and the verse says, you will in the future draw water with Sason and happiness. But if you say it's Sason the person, which is what Simcha is trying to interpret it as, it means Simcha is saying to Sason that they're going to draw water with you. They're going to use you to draw the water out. What does it mean? The Gemara says further that they're going to take your skin and make flasks out of it and use that to draw water, which is again a very lowly, a disgraceful thing. That is the conversation between these two heretics. So we have to, there's a lot of questions to ask here, a lot of interesting ways to look at this. Why is the Gemara giving me this conversation between two heretics? Why do I care what they have to say? The simple answer is pretty much that the Gemara is trying to show us how far these heretics went, what their nature was, how they took simple words as Sason and Simcha, happiness, in the verses and misinterpreted it for their own benefit, for their own usage, to lift up themselves and to bring down others, even if it was to each other, right? But the depth here is we have to ask again the original question: what's the difference between Sason and Simcha, these two types of happiness? And I believe we can say the following: one of them is an inner happiness, while the other one is an external happiness. In other words, we must say that the word simcha, happiness, means an inner contentness, an inner feeling of satisfaction and the opposite of worry, pretty much, right? Whereas sason means an outward expression of happiness, jumping, dancing, singing, laughing, right? And the way we can prove that is that the Gemara started off saying, how do we know that you have to blow the shofar when you're doing the water libations? And the proof that it brings is a verse that says you will draw water with sason. So obviously the trumpet, the shofarot, the music, is an external expression of happiness, a jubilant sort of happiness. And the Gemara is proving that with the word sason, which means the word sason must be connected to that specific type of happiness. Whereas simcha, however, there's a very, very important proof that I believe we can structure together, that simcha means an inner happiness. How do we know that? In the Torah, in Parashat Kitavo, at the end of the 6th Aliyah over there, it talks about a list of 98 terrible curses that Moshe warns the people that will befall upon them, lo alenu chas v'shalom, if they do not follow God's ways. And a lot of them have been prophetic, and a lot of them have happened already, unfortunately. But at the very end of that list of 98 terrible, scary curses, it says, you know why all these things are happening to you? It says in the Torah, "Tachat asher lo avadtem et Hashem Elokecha besimcha uberov kol." Because you did not serve Hashem your God in simcha, in the word simcha, with the word simcha. Now, what does simcha mean there? We have to say it means an inner contentness, an inner happiness. Why? Because the word used in that verse to talk about service of God is avadatim. You didn't work, avadim with the ayin. You didn't work, so to speak. You didn't work for God. You didn't worship God. You didn't serve Him. We also know, en avodah ela avodah shebalev, says the Gemara in Masechet Berachot. Whenever you see the word avodah, service, one of the quintessential types of service is avodah shebalev, service of the heart. What that means is tefillah, prayer. Tefillah, something we have to do several times a day, right? A certain meditation and an acknowledgement and service of God. And that mitzvah, right? It says, you have to serve Hashem your God. According to that, the Rambam says you have everyone, men and women, have a mitzvah from the Torah to pray to God at least once a day. So the first prayer you do in a certain day is a mitzvah from the Torah. And we have halakha regarding prayer that says you're not allowed to start praying en omdim b'tfilah b'kalut rosh. You're not allowed to start praying with something called kalut rosh. Kalut rosh means lightheadedness, not serious, playing around, joking, which means if you were watching a comedy show, not that you should be watching them, but if a person was watching a comedy show or sitting in a really jovial moment and really just, laughing out loud, which is another issue altogether, there's discussion about that, but whatever the case is, it was a very, very happy, joyous occasion, or he's joking around or whatever it is, and then right away, okay guys, it's time for mincha. You can't jump from this straight into praying. It doesn't work that way because that's not a proper thing. The halakha forbids that. Rather, you have to take a few minutes, a few moments to stop for a second, realize what you're about to do, speaking to the Creator of the world. Right? That's why the Chachamim institute that you have to say Ashrei Yosef that Tehillim before you start praying, because that gets you in the mood, so to speak, in the right mindset of what you're about to do. You have to be serious when you're doing avodah, praying. So if that's the case, if you have to be serious when you're doing avodah, then how do we explain the verse at the end of the curses? It says, that we learn from that verse that God requires a certain element of simcha. There must be simcha in your service of God, such as praying and other mitzvot as well. So what is that element? If it can't be, the outward, external, jumping around kind of happiness, then it must be a different type. And it must be the one I was telling you before, the inner happiness, the inner content and mindset that I am a servant of God. I am privileged to be a part of His nation. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to do the mitzvot. And I'm so happy with everything He does to me and gives me. That's an inner feeling. That's an inner obstacle that you have to overcome. And that's what simcha is, true simcha. It's something that's not necessarily detected from the outside. You could look at, Look at all these pictures of great Talmidei Chachamim, of huge people over the generations, huge spiritual giants. Very rarely will you find them smiling from ear to ear, with like that, because it could be fake. It could be fake if they do that. So many times you'll find them with a very stoic and serious look. But in order for them to have reached the levels they have reached, they must have achieved the element of simcha the Torah requires. And that element of simcha is not something clearly visible on the face. It's something deep within. That's the simcha that Hashem wants all of us to have in our service of Him. And therefore, also I saw, after doing all this research, I saw the Malbim, who comments in the book of Isaiah, the same thing. Baruch shekivanti. He says, Sason means an external, outward happiness. And Simcha means an internal happiness. And Simcha is not always detectable from the outside, but Sason always is, right? Because Sason is jumping around, laughing and dancing kind of happiness. But the question remains, we have these two heretics going back and forth, citing verses where both Simcha and Sason are mentioned in the same verse. And in some verses, Simcha comes first, and some verses, Sason comes first. So how do we explain that? Malbim says it's very simple. Because there are times when you need external happiness, the Sason comes first. You need to sort of force it, if you will. Fake it till you make it. You need to force that to show that you're happy, and eventually that seeps in, and it brings up and it gives you that inner simcha that's so much more valuable, right? It leaks in from the outside in. That's why you'll have that's a big inyan by Hasidim. Hasidim, they like to sing and dance and jump around because they're trying to exercise that very method. They're trying to force it on the outside until you start believing it on the inside. That's why some verses says Sason first and then Simcha. Whereas the other way, whenever the verse says Simcha first and then Sason, that's talking about situations where the Simcha, the inner happiness, automatically comes because of a certain, very, very serious joyous occasion, and that leads a person to have to express it outside. It's unable, it's unbearable. The happiness is so unbearable that it leaks outside. And both situations are true, and both situations happen. At the end of the day, it's simcha, it's the happiness that we have to achieve. Now, since we're on the topic, I wasn't thinking about talking about this, but since we're on the topic, just a few more minutes on how does someone achieve that, right? It's nice to define it, but how do we get it? That's what we all want. And if I was to put it in a nutshell, short and sweet, I would say the following. True happiness, simcha, is achieved not by us achieving large amounts of money or what most people think it is. Rather, it's being on a constantly progressive, productive track. Building things. Even if that means building one brick every day, as long as you're on the track of building, a person usually will find himself to be happy. Right? A lot of times if you want to define something or figure out how to get something, you have to analyze the opposite of that thing and see how that opposite comes about. So what's the opposite of depression? We might say, what's the opposite of happiness? We might say it's depression. How does a person become depressed or lost in life? It's very simple. It's when he or she sees or feels that there is no progression in their life. Meaning in the important parts of their life, whether it be their job, their relationship with their spouse, their relationship with their parents, relationship with their children, financially, spiritually, when they feel like they're not progressing, when they feel like they're stuck and they cannot change their situation, that's when depression kicks in, right? The word crying in Hebrew, boche means to cry. The root of that word is from the word mevucha. Mevucha means amaze, not amazing. A space, maze, M-A-Z-E, meaning, those things that you try to figure out. When you're stuck in a maze, what's the definition of a maze? Or a labyrinth is a more fancy word for it. What's the definition of that? It's where a person doesn't know where to go. Doesn't have direction. He's lost. That's what happens in a maze. A person gets lost. So he doesn't have a clear direction that he knows, I'm doing this every day, I'm working towards a goal, and I'm getting there or a step closer every day. right? He doesn't know what to do, doesn't know where to start this business, or to marry that person, or to become religious, not become religious. That state of indecision, indecisiveness, that's what leads to depression, and that's what's so dangerous. So therefore, the opposite of that is you have to have a goal, a plan that you work towards every single day, right? That's why you'll find people who, in the financial world, for example, in business, if a person has a business and he's building it every single day, slowly, even though he's not a millionaire, he's not super successful, but he sees a slight progression every month, a higher, every year he's making a little bit less than the year before. Making a little bit more than the year before. He won't necessarily be depressed regarding that. He'll feel like there is progression, there's movement, there's happiness. But if he sees that it's stagnant, or if he's losing, that's when depression kicks in. Now, of course, we just talked about building, and there's a lot of things in a person's life that he has to build, a lot of aspects. But the most important example of all those things, of course, is the spiritual one, which means a person can be very successful building, a financial empire, building physical successes. But towards the end of his life, inevitably you'll find that he's still lacking something. He's still missing something. He's still upset that he didn't build that one thing. And sometimes he can't even figure out what it is. He just feels like there's something missing in his heart. And of course, the Torah gives us the answer. The answer is that he never built himself. He never became the best human being that he could be. Forget about your bank account. Forget about your physical muscles. It's about the human being, the spiritual aspect, the humanity of it, the connection to his creator that his neshama is longing for. That he never built. And that's why he can still feel depressed. The best project you can take upon is the project of you. So when a person is constantly working every single day to become better and better at being himself, better and better at being an ultimate servant of God, then happiness automatically comes, no matter what other situation may be in. So may we all find happiness and the true God into life. Amen.